Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Ange Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 1 hidden gems going into the 2020 fantasy football season. Since last night's Thursday night football game between the Chiefs and the Texans, the amount of energy that radiated off of that game, the amount of excitement almost caused a snap-like reaction throughout the entire cosmos. Due to this, the 6 hidden gems need to be recollected in order to be able to balance our fantasy lineups, because not only did that snap last night create incredible performances by guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Patrick Mahomes or even David Johnson, who had himself a pretty good game in comparison to everything game script wise. It also hurt players like Cortland Sutton, Kenny Golladay, Mike Evans might miss week 1, leaving our lineups incomplete. So what are we looking for? We're looking for some hidden gems throughout the cosmos that can help complete our lineups, that could potentially be fantasy prospects that we can rely on, whether they're on our bench or in our starting lineups in the coming weeks. Now, specifically on today's episode, I'm talking about 6 different players, guys that I not only believe can have value this upcoming week, but also can have value throughout the good first quarter or potentially first half of the season based on their schedules. Besides their schedules, I also think that their talent is going to shine through, and they're going to be given an ample amount of opportunity this upcoming season, which in my opinion will eventually result in success. So we'll talk about my 6 players, starting off here with number 1. The Power Stone will be represented by Tyrod Taylor. Now, as you can see on screen, Tyrod Taylor has one of the easiest schedules this upcoming season in terms of the quarterback position for the first half of the season. I mean, he takes on the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1, but then after that, plays against the Chiefs, Panthers, Buccaneers, Saints, Jets, Dolphins, and Jaguars. Now, assuming Tyrod Taylor stays as the starting quarterback of this team and they let Justin Herbert sit behind him and learn, Tyrod Taylor has a very favorable schedule. In fact, in comparison to the strength of schedule of last season, if you had calculated it out, Tyrod Taylor has the 5th easiest schedule amongst all quarterbacks for the first 8 weeks of the season if we take 2019's strength of schedule habits from defenses giving up points to opposing quarterbacks, which I always talk about. But again, just looking at those teams, a lot of those secondaries are struggling heavily, and I think if in fact Tyrod Taylor could take advantage of that, he could be an extremely valuable prospect. But in week 1, who does he play against? He plays against the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, this is a defense that has struggled over the last couple of years. And I think Tyrod Taylor, with the weapons that currently surround him, in an offense that, in my opinion, is probably the most talented offense that he's been on in terms of Eckler, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, if he ends up playing this week. That in itself, that kind of value that surrounds him, an improved offensive line. I know they're a little bit banged up. I think their center, Marquise Pouncey, is going to miss this week. But I truly do think with Tyrod Taylor's ability, the fact that he does not turn over the ball, he has in 2015, 2016, and 2017 averaged over 525 yards rushing each of those 3 seasons in the 43 total games that he played. On top of that, this guy's going to at least have 5 rushing touchdowns throughout a season if in fact he plays the full 16 games. So the value's there in the running game. On top of it, because he doesn't turn over the ball and because he's sort of like that game manager-esque kind of quarterback, he's going to put his team in positions to win, and he's also going to get down in the red zone and allow players like Henry and Eckler and Keenan Allen to make plays after the catch and put them into a successful position. So ultimately, I think with Tyrod Taylor's value this upcoming week and his value potentially in the first 8 weeks of the season, on top of the fact that he's only owned in 8% of Yahoo leagues and 2% of NFL.com leagues, that in itself, pretty juicy. So I think Tyrod Taylor has a very good opportunity this week against Cincinnati Bengals. I'm expecting him to at least have a pretty good game, potentially. Keep an eye on him. I mean, I'm not saying to go pick him up. I'm just saying keep an eye on him for the upcoming weeks, because he could definitely be a streaming quarterback in the coming weeks based on that schedule and based on his upcoming performances. Moving on, we have our next hidden gem on hand. We have ourselves Anthony Miller of the Chicago Bears. And a lot of people think of Anthony Miller and think, okay, well, he's actually quite widely owned. He's owned in 58% of Yahoo leagues and 46% of NFL.com leagues. And though that may be the case, I don't think he's owned in enough leagues, to be honest. I think he should have ownership around 73+% in comparison to the other wide receivers that are being owned throughout your fantasy leagues. But looking at what Anthony Miller is capable of doing and what he's capable of in these upcoming week matchups, I mean, looking at the schedule down below, he plays against the Detroit Lions right off the rip. And I think that in itself is an incredible matchup for him. But then he also gets to take on the Giants, Falcons, Colts, Buccaneers, Panthers, LA Rams, and the Saints within his first 8 games of the season. Another one of these players that has a very soft schedule. Now, in fact, I went ahead and I looked at last season's strength of schedule and kind of implemented it now. the Chicago Bears, in fact, would have the easiest strength of schedule at the wide receiver position if we took last year's strength of schedule numbers of defenses and how many points they give up to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis. So Allen Robinson is going to be feasting. And in turn, the number 2 wide receiver for this offense, regardless who's at quarterback, whether it's Trubisky, even though we'd love to have Foles because he hyper targets the slot receivers like an Anthony Miller, I think Anthony Miller is definitely capable of coming out and balling out this year. Now, he did have a surgery this offseason. He is, full go this upcoming week against the Lions. And the thing is, last season, he produced pretty well against the Lions. Now, it also had to do with the fact that between weeks 11 through 15, he was really a huge staple of this offense. Throughout that time, throughout those 5 games, he was averaging 14.32 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format in which he garnered 52 targets that led to 33 receptions, 431 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. And he played 82% of the snap counts in those weeks. That in itself, an incredible stat. Now, in one of those 5 performances that I was referring to, Anthony Miller played against the Chicago Bears and in fact had 13 targets for 9 receptions and 140 receiving yards just last season. And even on top of that, the offense for the Bears, when they played against the Lions last year, found a lot of success. In fact, Mitchell Trubisky was a shining star in those games. In the 2 contests that they played against the Detroit Lions, he had accumulated 511 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and only threw 1 interception. Let's not forget, Mitchell Trubisky can be a capable quarterback, but they have to put him in winning situations. They cannot have him try to come back from, and just try to, muster up some sort of comeback. He is not one of those kind of quarterbacks. On top of it, if in fact Mitchell Trubisky can get his legs moving like he did in 2018, he had over 400 rushing yards. If we can get Mitchell Trubisky back to that kind of a offensive scheme where he's able to be mobile and move with his legs and extend plays, I think Anthony Miller, Allen Robinson, those 2 are going to benefit the most from that because, again, those are the 2 leading receivers outside of Tariq Cohen in this offense. Even if we go back to 2018 with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback, Anthony Miller had himself a successful game against Detroit as well. He had 5 catches for 122 and a touchdown back in 2018. So Miller has shown a lot of tendencies to at least tear up this Lions defense if in fact given the opportunity. I think this week is a pretty good matchup for him on hand. Again, even if you don't want to play him, you just want to pick him up, stash him on your bench, which I absolutely suggest you doing. His upcoming schedule looks nice. So let's go ahead, let's take it easy on him, see how he performs, and then we'll go ahead and we'll play him in the upcoming matchups because, again, the Giants, Falcons, those are pretty easy matchups. And then, Tampa Bay and New Orleans always struggle against opposing wide receivers. So does the Panthers. Again, these are matchups against the NFC South, which, again, wide receivers always succeed against. Now that we've covered Anthony Miller as the Space Stone, we can go ahead and move on to the Reality Stone, or AKA the Ether. Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, and the reality of the situation for the Niners wide receiver core. The fact of the matter is that Deebo Samuel has already been said to be out this week. He's not going to play. Brandon Ayuk has been dealing with a lot of injuries, and as it currently stands, Kendrick Bourne seems like the most healthy wide receiver with the most experience in this offense. And though he played a lot in the slot last season, the question remains, what is he capable of doing if he's given the number 1 wide receiver spot for the San Francisco 49ers? But the thing is, I'm not really worried about his potential productivity. I'm just thinking the amount of opportunity that is on hand for Kendrick Bourne and how he's going to be able to produce with said opportunity. Kendrick Bourne is typically a guy that when you get down in the red zone, you get into a 3 wide receiver formation, and Jimmy Garoppolo is looking in his direction. In fact, last season, throughout the regular season, he had 6 total red zone targets, which led to 5 receiving touchdowns. Now, when you play against the Arizona Cardinals, Jimmy Garoppolo is always up at bat and ready to score a lot of touchdowns. In fact, in each of the games, he averaged 4 passing touchdowns against the Arizona Cardinals last season. So when we go into this week's matchup, sure, George Kittle is going to be able to produce, but what is Kendrick Bourne capable of doing? Now, as of this moment in time, Kendrick Bourne's only owned in 7% of Yahoo leagues and only 1% of NFL.com leagues. And when I look at this roster and I look at what's capable, they're capable of producing, this is a capable offense for certain. There's a reason why they got to the Super Bowl. But if Deebo Samuel's gone, if Brandon Ayuk is questionable and or limited, and Tevin Coleman, I'm hearing a lot because of his sickle cell disease, there's a potential that because of the weather conditions with all the fires that are going on in California, that he might not play and he might choose not to play. Everything's looking like this team is going to be a little bit shorthanded. So they're going to have to ask guys like Kendrick Bourne to step up, and I expect him to do so this upcoming week. Not only that, even if Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel are going to be injured for the upcoming weeks, look at their upcoming schedule below. They play against the Cardinals week 1, sure, but the Jets, the New York Giants, the Eagles, and the Dolphins. That in itself is one of the easiest strength of schedules I could see at the wide receiver position. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be great. I think Kendrick Bourne, if in fact healthy, and the number one receiving option, is going to garner a lot of targets, which will eventually lead to his upcoming success. I think this is a guy you could pick up and easily put on your bench who's going to have value in the upcoming weeks. So that's my idea and thought process on Kendrick Bourne. Now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on and talk about the next hidden gem of the week. We talk about the Soul Stone. Now, like many of you remember, the Soul Stone requires a sacrifice. And this week, unfortunately, the sacrifice will come in the direction of Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay will probably miss this week's game against the Chicago Bears. But don't worry, Marvin Jones is going to pick up majority of the work. And though I thought perhaps suggesting Marvin Jones would be a good idea, Marvin Jones is owned in a lot more leagues than you would expect. And I kind of want to go for some hidden gems, per se. So we go after TJ Hockenson, tight end. The former Iowa tight end, a guy that has come from a great lineage of tight ends himself. I mean, besides Noah Fant, who will probably pop off in week 1, you got George Kittle, and you have TJ Hockenson, guys that were working out this offseason together to improve in honing on their skills. I think TJ Hockenson, as of this moment in time, is kind of undervalued at the tight end position. Though he's owned in 73% of leagues, that's just the tight end position. A lot of people want to roster 2 tight ends, and I've been talking about this guy all offseason as a potential guy that could be an upside top 12 tight end if in fact everything clicks in this offense. Last year, they targeted the tight end position 20+% of the time because their offensive coordinator wants to use the tight end position as much as possible. 11 personnel is something that the Lions love to use, especially when you can leave in another blocker and chip block on a guy like Khalil Mack, who will be coming after Matthew Stafford this week. Regardless, now that you sacrifice Kenny Golladay, and typically Golladay and Marvin Jones are the 2 targets for Matthew Stafford. He's always looking for them. Hawkinson's going to have to step up because not only is Kenny Golladay going to, be out potentially, Danny Amendola has been dealing with some injuries. And outside of that, this running back backfield, it's RBBC. It's going to be a rotation. Hawkinson's going to have to step up. And if Hockenson is something similar to what Sammy Watkins did yesterday, maybe he is a week 1 monster because last season, week 1, he had an incredible game. To be exact, TJ Hockenson in week 1 of 2019 against the Arizona Cardinals just dominated. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 131 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Now, when we look at his upcoming schedule, he plays against the Bears, the Green Bay Packers, and the Cardinals. And I think that stretch of games could be advantageous for a guy like TJ Hockenson if, in fact, Kenny Golladay is going to miss some sort of time. So even if he's your backup tight end, you want to go ahead and grab guys like these because in the upcoming weeks, the potential of a guy like this maybe popping off and having himself some great value could lead to you potentially trading them to teams that perhaps didn't get the tight end that they wanted in their draft and are looking to go ahead and at least acquire a tight end. And instead of just allowing them to pick it up off the waivers, you can go ahead and stash a player like this and have some success. Now, last year, TJ Hockenson against the Chicago Bears found some success. Though in both games, he played with different quarterbacks, one with Matthew Stafford and one with David Blau. He had a pretty good amount of opportunity. In fact, he had 17 targets in the 2 games that led to 9 receptions and 65 yards. If we can go ahead and get those passes a little bit more accurate, which with Stafford is definitely going to happen, there's going to be a higher catch rate and higher potential for TJ Hockenson, especially down in the red zone, to find some success. I think TJ Hockenson can be a great play and or potential guy that in the upcoming weeks could be stashed on your bench, could have some great performances and potentially traded over the next couple weeks. Regardless, we go ahead, we add him to the list, and we move on to our next stone, our next hidden gem. We have ourselves DeSean Jackson of the Philadelphia Eagles. And DeSean Jackson, though he has been injury prone over the last couple of years, though he is in the back 9 of his career to say the very least, he finds himself with the Philadelphia Eagles in a week 1 matchup against the Washington football team. And last season, week 1, against the Washington football team, he dominated. I mean, he was actually unstoppable. 8 receptions for 154 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. It was a 31.4 fantasy point game in a half PPR scoring setting. Now, as of this moment in time, DeSean Jackson is only owned in 51% of Yahoo leagues and 44% of NFL.com leagues. And the way I see it, it's only a matter of time until DeSean Jackson really proves himself once again to being one of these upper echelon wide receivers. On top of the fact that Alshon Jeffrey is still on the PUP list. Jalen Reagor has been practicing in full. He still has a torn labrum. That guy's a ticking time bomb in my opinion. So you want to have shares of DeSean Jackson because if in fact Reagor is to re-injure his shoulder, he's going to require surgery and it's going to be time for a guy like DeSean Jackson to be the number one for Carson Wentz. And anytime you can have a talented player like DeSean Jackson who could spread the field with a quarterback who needs a wide receiver, because my goodness, the last couple of years have been tough for the Eagles wide receiver core in terms of injuries. I think DeSean Jackson can absolutely, dominate. Now, again, when we talk about Carson Wentz has played very well against the Washington football team. In fact, last season, he had a 70% passing completion percentage average in the 2 games he played against them, averaged 290 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns against them in 2019. That is fantastic. Again, you can go ahead and pick up Jalen Reagor, but I think most of all, DeSean Jackson, of all the players that I'm going to name today on the Hidden Gems, is a guy that you could probably apply into your lineup right now as a wide receiver 3 flex option that can have a monster week. On top of it, his upcoming schedule is not that scary. You play against the Washington football team, then you go against, Jalen Ramsey. That's, probably one of the tougher matchups, but then you get the Cincinnati Bengals the week after that. I think in these upcoming weeks, depending on how he's going to be utilized, I think he's got the ability to stretch the field. Not only that, but have the targets from Carson Wentz for a number 1 wide receiver in an offense that wants to throw the ball 30 plus, times a game. I think DeSean Jackson's got a lot of high upside and could definitely be, a week 1 game winner based on just putting him in your lineup and letting him feast against the Washington football team secondary. So we add DeSean Jackson and we move on to our last hidden gem on hand. We have the Mind Stone. Now, cursed with knowledge, I thought to myself, what exactly represents the Mind Stone? We have to think about the potential of week 1 and moving on, and what offenses we're not really tapping into very much. And I looked at the Washington football team and I thought to myself, well, there's a potential that the Washington football team this upcoming season could have some value outside of Terry McLaurin, because outside of him, we haven't really heard of much. Maybe Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, these running backs are starting to gain some steam, but a lot of people are ignoring Steven Sims Jr. Now, Steven Sims Jr. from weeks 15 through 17 of last season was incredible. He had 29 targets, 16 receptions, 190 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. He was averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game in a half PPR setting in the last 3 weeks of the 2019 season. So if you're going to average that many points, if you're going to catch the eye of Dwayne Haskins in this offense, if you're going to be the number 2 wide receiver and to play in the slot position, I think to myself, well, you're going against the Eagles, then you play against the Cardinals, then you play against the Browns. There could be a huge potential for Steven Sims Jr., who's not only just a starting wide receiver for this team, but a starting kick returner and punt returner for those of you who play in leagues in which you get points per return yards. I think Steven Sims Jr. has a great opportunity this upcoming week to not only just be an option where against a weaker secondary, he could take advantage of it and probably catch the ball upwards of 6 times, but he could, maybe catch the eye of Dwayne Haskins, score a touchdown. That upside, that potential, on top of the fact that he's only owned in 6% of Yahoo leagues and 2% of NFL.com leagues, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Steven Sims Jr. I know there's other talent at the wide receiver position, but there's nothing that's going to take his opportunity away from him, in my opinion. I think there's a great upside with a player like this and his upcoming schedule. I think he'll be going against Roby Coleman of the Eagles, formerly of the Rams and the Bills. But I think even with that matchup, they're going to move him around. He's going to find himself some opportunity, some ability, and make some plays. So he is my Mind Stone. I'm cursed with knowledge. And we close out our list, our hidden gems of week 1 with him. These are my hidden gems of week 1. Again, the Power Stone represented by Tyrod Taylor, the Space Stone represented by Anthony Miller, the Reality Stone represented by Kendrick Bourne, the Soul Stone represented by TJ Hockenson, the Time Stone represented by DeSean Jackson. Again, he's old, but time is on his side. And we have the Mind Stone represented by Steven Sims Jr. of the Washington football team. Again, these are my hidden gems. These are guys that I think over the next coming weeks could be of value. Again, when we're looking for value, we want to go ahead and scour the waiver wire as much as we possibly can to find value. And I'm going pretty deep here, but I'm hoping these guys could potentially pan out in the upcoming weeks. If they go ahead and perform this week, that'll give us more confidence in the upcoming weeks to potentially start them. But regardless, thank you everybody for watching. I really do appreciate the support. We just recently hit 22,000 subscribers on the channel. If you guys haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community. Again, smash that like button on today's video if you like the Hidden Gem series. I cannot thank you guys enough. I appreciate the continued support. Remember, tomorrow, Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kickoff with Kirchhoff. We're setting lineups prior to kickoff, helping you guys out, answering questions. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.